Good morning, students. In continuation of our previous class, today we are continuing with the waterborne diseases. In the first week of September 1854, that's the middle of 19th century, around 600 people living within a particular area known as Broad Street Pump in London, that's in central London, died of a particular disease called Asiatic cholera. John Snow, he was an anesthetist actually. He was practicing in that area at that time. He was popular beforehand because he administered chloroform to Queen Victoria during her childbirth. He found a number of people suffering from cholera, that is Asiatic cholera, in his chamber. He was inquisitive on this and he started what is known as shoe leather epidemiology, that is not practicing epidemiology, sitting in the air conditioned chamber. He went by house to house visit and asked every person living in that particular Broad Street area regarding the source of their drinking water, and he found that it was a particular pump. The source of this pump water was Thames River. So he told that it is probably due to some source of contaminated water. At the time, Director General was Sir William Farr. He was believing in the theory that is miasmatic theory. Miasm is meaning that means cloud. According to this theory, these diseases consisting of the intestinal infections occur in the people living in the lower altitude, and the data also corroborated with this. But Dr. Snow, he was very stubborn to his theory and is recommended for the changing of this particular pump handle. The local administration agreed with it, they changed that one, and within few weeks, within 1 or 2 weeks, drastically the number of the diseased people of cholera reduced. By that time, this theory of John Snow was not accepted by our medical science, but later on, and this was the work later on by Sir William Farr himself, who presented after death of Dr. John Snow that the contaminated water that is responsible for intestinal infections. And John Snow is known as father of epidemiology. So today our topic of discussion is cholera and then typhoid fever. In the background of this particular slide, you can see this is the Broad Street, and beside in the background that is John Snow pub, and in front of this is that pump that is preserved there. And our learning objectives are to learn the epidemiology of cholera, to differentiate cholera from food poisoning, and to know the preventive measures and control of the cholera. First, we are going to the epidemiology. Cholera is an endemic disease since the beginning of recorded history, and it was the Ganges and Brahmaputra, the rivers, which were the sources of the drinking water, and so West Bengal and Bangladesh were popularly called as home of cholera. Up to 1864, this was the classical Vibrio that was responsible for cholera. From 1865, the era of the Iltar cholera started. Iltar is an area situated in Makkah where pilgrims go for the Hajj every year. And from there, the cholera outbreak in 1864-5, a cholera outbreak took place, and from the name of the place, this was named as Iltar cholera. Cholera causes 5 to 10% of the acute diarrheal diseases. And this we can see the epidemic curve of cholera. From the curve, we can well understand that this curve is showing that is rapid rise and gradual fall, unlike the curve of the food poisoning, which shows the rapid rise, rapid fall. Along the x-axis we have the time in days, and along the y-axis we have the number of the cases in frequency. It is for the food poisoning, that is rapid rise and rapid fall, and here no plateau, because food poisoning usually lasts for very few short period of time, and here we can see a brief plateau, and it touches the baseline. Now the epidemiological determinants. In our examination, we have to face the long questions on epidemiology of any disease. Any disease epidemiology may come and this type of the questions come in almost every year, or at least in alternate year, the epidemiology of this disease or that disease. For that purpose, though we hate definition, we have to remember the definition of the epidemiology, and for our viva voce examination, we have to at least go prepared with 3 definitions, that is the definition of the epidemiology, public health, and of course the definition of the health. Definition of epidemiology is a bit easy if you can make it of your own, that is distribution and determinants of the agent, host and environment to interplay, to have an interaction in ambient time, place and person for the causation of the disease and measures for their prevention and control. And here for the epidemiological determinants of cholera, the causative factor is the agent factor is the Vibrio cholera. Period of infectivity is 8 to 10 days. Reservoir of infection are the cases or the carriers, and here a question, the MCQ often comes, the disease among the following diseases which have the all types of the carrier, that is the cholera, having the incubatory carrier, contact carrier, convalescence and chronic carrier. All types of the carriers may occur in cholera. For every case having the 50 to 100 subclinical or the inapparent cases, and these are the subclinical or the inapparent cases which are responsible for maintaining the disease factor in the inter-epidemic period. We have already seen that cholera is an endemic disease in almost all the countries, especially in India. Endemicity means that is the disease is constantly present, disease or the health related condition is constantly present without the occurrence of beyond the expected occurrence, that is no epidemic, it is constantly present like as influenza, but it may show the epidemicity also, and also the pandemic, that is already going on. Like as in cholera, it is endemic condition, may show epidemic in at some period of the time. And during this inter-epidemic period, endemicity have to be maintained for the survival of the disease itself. That is maintained by the subclinical and the inapparent cases. The host factors, cholera can affect all the ages and any gender, male, female, others, etc. During epidemics, usually the adults are sufferer, whereas during the non-epidemics, that is the endemic period, children are affected. So the endemicity is maintained by the inapparent or the subclinical cases, and most of the time the children. Environmental factors, cholera shows a seasonal trend. We all know that the cholera occur in the summer months and monsoon seasons, and climate, it is more in the humid climate. Transmission, cholera shows the fecal-oral route of transmission. Contaminated, what are the sources? That is the contaminated food, fruits and vegetables, fingers, fomites, and house fly acts as the mechanical vector. In the epidemiology chapter, we have read that is the types of transmission. It may be the direct transmission, maybe the indirect transmission, maybe the mechanical transmission, maybe the biological transmission. Here the cholera for housefly acts as the mechanical vector. Mechanical vector means that is the housefly, it goes outside and sits on the faces of some cholera affected person, and in its leg it gets contaminated. It comes inside our room. We are keeping our foods, fruits and vegetables open, and that fly having legs contaminated with that feces, infected feces, sits on that, and by that process, the disease is transmitted. In case of the biological transmission, the disease agent goes inside the body of the vector and it either multiplies or change in the form or do both the things. That is the biological thing, biological transmission. In mechanical, the vector inside the body of the vector, the organism does not go. Only the mechanical, it takes here and keep there. And the predisposing factors are the poor sanitation, poverty, illiteracy and ignorance. If the people are ignorant regarding their health, sanitation, hygiene, then the responsibility of course comes to the healthcare service providers. That is, it is our responsibility. We have failed to make people aware of the good sanitation, good health and hygienic practices. And the areas where the people get overcrowded, like as the fair, festivals, pilgrims, there we often it comes often in the news, that is in Kumbh Mela, in some festivals, there has been the outbreak of cholera. Now it is the differences between the cholera and the food poisoning. The features are almost the same, but there are certain differences. Like as in cholera, diarrhea occurs in both of them. In case of the cholera, it precedes vomiting. It starts with cholera, starts with diarrhea, that is the passage of the loose stool more than equal to 3 times in a day, and food poisoning starts with the vomiting. Initially the person starts with the vomiting, thereafter the loose motion starts. Tenesmus, that is the painful passage of the stool, that is present in the food poisoning. Stool in case of the cholera is watery, and the peculiar name has this, that is the rice water stool. After clearing the rice, the water that comes off, that is the type of the characteristic type of the cholera stool. And one more thing, in case of the typhoid, we find that is the pea soup stool. These are also the MCQ. These may come as the MCQ. Rice water stool is found in the following disease, or pea soup stool is found in this disease, that kind of thing. Whereas in case of the food poisoning, stool is not watery, it is semi-solid type but is offensive. Vomiting is projectile, it goes in case of the cholera, it comes in jet, and in case of the food poisoning, it is violent and distressing. Vomitus is also watery in case of the cholera. In cholera, people pass more amount of the that is watery contents, and for that we have the lack of the fluids and the electrolytes very fast. Cholera is a very fast going condition, and so that in our literature we have read that person started cholera, person started vomiting and diarrhea with by the midst of the night, midnight, and thereafter fell down from her bed and died. The people on going morning found her dead. This type of the descriptions we have seen in our old literature. Now coming to the prevention and control. In this right hand side picture, very often this comes as the short note, that is write a short note on sanitation barrier. What is sanitation barrier? Here we can see a barrier have been created from the from the feces the organism or the causative factor cannot come to the fluid, fruits and foods and the vegetables, then fomites and the fingers and flies. If the fly cannot get in contact with the feces, so that the disease cannot take place, and then these things have to be also kept separated by making a barrier. This is called as the sanitation barrier. How the sanitation barrier can be created? This may come as one question in your this week assignment. Start thinking on it, and you may face this question for this week assignment. And by making the sanitation barrier, we are preparing the blocking of the channel of transmission. We have to give people the health education, and one important thing for the examination purpose, that is the observation of the intensified diarrhea control fortnight. This is an initiative keeping in the back of mind, that is 5 to 10% of under 5 death globally, and in India it is 10%. The figure is 10% of under 5 death takes place due to the diarrheal disease. So from Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, there was a program was initiated, that is the Intensified Diarrhea Control Fortnight, IDCF. And West Bengal was the first state who started rolling on this program. In June 2014, it was started first in West Bengal, and thereafter all the states adopted this. In Intensified Diarrhea Control Fortnight, in the year 2019, it was observed from the 12th to 27th of June 2019. And what is done? Fortnight, that means 15 days activities. In this 15 days activities, it is divided into two components. Some activities to be done in the first week and some in the second week. In the first week, the main emphasis is given on the diarrhea control activities, and in the very second week, the IYCF activities. What is IYCF? In last class, we have already discussed. That is infant and young child feeding practice. This is both important for MCQ, for your short note, for your viva voce. IYCF, very often asked. Now, what are the principles of IYCF? That is the early initiation of breastfeeding. That is initiation of breastfeeding as soon as possible following normal delivery and within 1 hour in case of cesarean section. Next is the exclusive breastfeeding. That is nothing to be given other than breast milk. Third thing is the initiation of the age appropriate complementary feeding. Keep in mind that it's a weaning. The term is obsolete now. Never use the term, never utter the term weaning. Now the term is there, that is the complementary feeding. Age appropriate complementary feeding, that means choosing at least 4 food items from the 7 food categories. It had to be started after completion of the 6 months of the exclusive breastfeeding and continuation of the breastfeeding for 2 years and beyond. These are the 4 principles of the IYCF. Coming to the IDCF, Intensified Diarrhea Control Fortnight. The activities which are done are, first thing, that is the distribution and counseling regarding the ORS, distribution of ORS and giving health education to the people regarding its usage and how to prevent the diarrhea, these things, how to prevent the dehydration, kind of these things. And these activities are provided by ASHA workers at our village level, house to house activity. Second thing, that is the infection prevention and control, IPC, infection prevention and control activities at the household level, that is going to for the house to house visit, and this is done by the auxiliary nurse midwives, that is the ANMs. Third thing, that is the promotion of the breastfeeding, that is following the IYCF guidelines. They go to the house, and in the houses where there are the children having the up to 2 years of the age, they are given the advice by the ANMs. That is also house to house activity. The fourth one, that is the ORS and zinc supplementation activities. This is done at the facility level, where there is the preparation of the Warty Kerner with the zinc supplementation. We know that zinc supplementation is given at the dose of the 10 to 20 mg per day for 14 days. For 14 days. The fifth one is the intersectoral collaboration. Because to carry on these activities, we need the collaboration of the different other sectors. Say for the school. At the school, our frontline health workers, that is ASHA, Anganwadi workers and ANMs, they go for the school visits and they demonstrate and give the advices for the proper hand washing practices. This is another component of this IDCF activity, these fortnight activities. So the school, that is the educational institution, their involvement is must. Then ICDS. ICDS have to be involved, that is Anganwadi centers. Then the Food Safety and Security Authority of India, then Ministry of the Water Supply and Sanitation, these have to be involved in these activities. So this is the IDCF. Now on completion of the cholera, we are going to the typhoid fever. Here our learning objectives are, first to overview the typhoid fever, to know the epidemiology of typhoid and to elaborate its prevention and control. First, have a brief introduction. It is an acute infectious disease which is waterborne. Typhoid fever is named as enteric fever. The diagnosis is written as the enteric fever. Diagnosis enteric fever. And under this there comes two things. First is the typhoid fever. It is more common, caused by the Salmonella typhi. It is more lethal. Another one is the paratyphoid fever. It is caused by the Salmonella paratyphi. It is less common and of course less lethal. Typhoid fever is also an endemic disease in India. Coming to the epidemiology. First, the agent factor, that is Salmonella typhi. It has somatic O antigen. The antibody to this O antigen is higher among the cases. Flagellar H antigen, the antibody to which is higher among the immunized people, that is people who are immunized against the typhoid fever. And capsular VI polysaccharide antigen, antibody to which is higher among the carriers. Coming to the reservoir, for the typhoid it is very important for the reservoir, and more than the cases, the more important reservoir is the typhoid meri. This is typhoid meri. This is a term that is asked in the examination. Here you can see this picture. That is, picture is showing most humble, most harmless, and yet the most dangerous woman in America. Most harmless and yet the most dangerous woman in America. She was Mary. By profession she was a cook. By birth an Irish woman. She was working as a cook in different restaurants and different pubs, houses also throughout her life. And once she got involved in some area, in some food preparation areas, a number of people got infected from that. Throughout her lifetime, she infected 1,300 people. Of them, 51 died of typhoid fever because she was the first discovered asymptomatic carrier. Asymptomatic, that is, she had no sign symptoms or no manifestation. She herself was asymptomatic, but from her excretions and secretions the organism could spread. For last 20 years of her life she was kept in quarantine, and there in that quarantine she died. So typhoid meri, that is the asymptomatic carrier, most important source of the reservoir of the infection. Reservoir and source are somewhat different. Source is where only the organism harbor, and the reservoir is where the organism harbor and also undergoes multiplication. Now the host factors. Typhoid fever occurs more common among the young children and more cases more common in the boys, whereas the carriers are more in the girls. Environmental factor, it shows a seasonal trend from July to September in the poor environmental sanitation, and it shows the fecal-oral route of transmission. Now coming to very important thing, that is the clinical feature. In the first week there is the fever. We all know that fever is itself not a disease. It is a manifestation of some disease condition. It may be the manifestation of an inflamed gallbladder, that is cholecystitis. It may be the manifestation of some vector-borne disease, that may be dengue, that may be the malaria. Fever itself may be a fever of unknown etiology, that is the pyrexia of unknown origin, PUO. When a patient comes to us with fever in our clinic or OPD, we have to take several history. First, that is the onset of fever, how the fever started, and then what is the frequency of per day frequency of the fever, periodicity of the fever, how many times the fever comes. If the fever is associated with chill and rigor, how the fever goes, if it is associated with the sweating when goes off, what was the maximum rise of the temperature, then associated any symptoms, maybe the body ache, headache, malaise. These symptoms may clinch the diagnosis. Maybe if the person gives history of having excessive headache along with the fever and neck pain, Then we have to examine for the neck rigidity. It may be a case of meningitis. If headache in some particular area, it may be some infective etiology or some SOL having get infected later on. So we have to taking the history of fever thoroughly. And in typhoid, the fever shows a step ladder pattern, that is, it gradually rises in the first week. In the second week, the person will give the history that in this particular phase, the person with the typhoid fever gives peculiar history. Last week, when I started the fever, it was showing up and down. Some days it was 99 degree Fahrenheit and some days it was 102. But this week the fever is remaining almost the same. Most of the days it was reported as 102, 102.1, sometimes 102.6, this kind of things. That is, the fever has started to reach a plateau phase. Systematic features are more common. A peculiar coated tongue. In the last concluding slide, I have given a picture, that is the peculiar coated tongue appearance of the typhoid fever. Relative bradycardia, and that is the pea soup stool. In the third week, the features of, if it is not treated, the features of toxemia starts, that is the hypotension, tachycardia, cold clammy extremities, and of course the mental clouding, that is the clouding of consciousness, disorientation, this feature starts. Then the investigation. Investigation plays a very important role for the diagnosis of the typhoid fever, because the Vidal test, that is the D test for the typhoid fever, it takes around 7 to 10 days to come. So if in the first week we goes for the Vidal test, then no result will come, and falsely we can diagnose that is the patient is not having typhoid fever, that is the false negative, falsely negative, but actually the person may have the typhoid fever. So in the first week we have to go for the blood culture. In the second week, complete hemogram consisting of the hemoglobin percentage, total count, differential count, ESR, and also we have to see the platelet count to make it differentiated from the other diseases, especially the person is having fever. So we have to make the differential diagnosis, that is, that may be dengue. We have to exclude some other etiological, some other infective etiology, we have to go for the C-reactive protein. And of course the Vidal test. In the Vidal test, the H more than 1:200 and O more than 1:100 titer, that is indicative of having the typhoid fever. In the third week, repeat Vidal. Repeat Vidal, why to do? Because to see whether the titer have gone down, and of course stool and urine culture. Typhoid fever is most notorious disease condition to produce the complications. It is very often to produce relapse, hemorrhage and perforation of the intestinal ulcers, meningitis, myocarditis, pneumonia, hepatitis, osteomyelitis. You can see almost affecting all the systems of the body. So after the typhoid fever goes off, for next 2 to 3 weeks we have to be very cautious, and so the patient is kept in isolation until 2 to 3 cultures are negative. For 2 weeks, patient will be advised for rest, to take rest for next 2 weeks. Chemotherapy, nowadays the person is given with the ceftriaxone and cefotaxime. Follow up done with the stool and the urine culture, and breaking the chain of transmission and vaccination. The typhoid fever, the vaccines are, that is most commonly given, that is the TY21A, that is the oral vaccine, and another one, that is the parenteral vaccine, that is the Typhim VI from the capsular polysaccharide. So in summary, both cholera and typhoid fever are waterborne diseases transmitted by the fecal-oral route of transmission. They produce predominantly intestinal symptoms besides huge number of the systemic involvement by the typhoid fever. They can be prevented by sanitation barrier, improved hygienic practices and vaccination. So here we can see in the conclusion slide, this is the typhoid tongue. This is not called typhoid tongue, this is the peculiar coated tongue. Once you see in your lifetime, you will never forget. And here there is the observation of the IDCF, intensified diarrhea control fortnight. So thank you all.